This is My First Job in Sports, the show created to kickstart your journey toward a successful career in the sports industry. Presented by SBRnet, your comprehensive source for data focused on sports fans and more. Here's your host of My First Job in Sports, Neil Schwartz.
Hey, so I want to thank everyone for tuning in to this episode of My First Job in Sports. Of course, I'm your host, Neil Schwartz, and I am joined by Dr. G, my wonderful co-host. Dr. G was just talking about summer in Chicago. By the way, one of my favorite places to summer.
Summertime, it's up there with New York. New York and Chicago, I think they have the best summers. The worst winters, but the best summers.
So I want to get into a couple of different things, but the one thing I want to really get into is that if you only watch one episode of My First Job in Sports, the one and the interview that's going to be following this introduction is just incredibly inspirational. Dr. G and I spoke to Brian Anderson and his story about how sports literally has changed his life. And when I say changed his life, I'm meaning going from as difficult as life can get to being at a point where, you know, he's happy, he's thriving, he's doing well, and he's helping others and he's giving back. And, you know, really, this is a wonderful story. So again, wonderful episode featuring Brian Anderson. But before we get going, there's a new segment that we've been doing here on My First Job in Sports called Neil's Data Dump. And, you know, this week, I'm going to actually talk about the reason I was in Chicago a couple of weeks ago. The Sports Philanthropy Network, which is founded by a gentleman named Roy Kessel. Roy's a great guy. He does a conference every year in Chicago. I was invited. This was my second year, and I was lucky enough to give a presentation to talk a little bit about, you know, sports philanthropy and really the giving power of sports fans. And while I'm not going to get into the whole presentation because it's kind of long, and I was joined by actually someone who's, I guess she was your graduate assistant, Pega. She's wonderful, by the way. But we talked a little bit about the power of giving and sports fans. And here's a couple of little tidbits, little statistics that I wanted to throw out there. Around 10% of all sports fans across, whether it's team sports, individual sports, professional, college, you name it, give to some sort of sports-related charitable effort. So 10% of all fans. Now, what's interesting is that number pops up to almost 16% of those fans that attend events live. So really, for those organizations that are looking to leverage sports fans, you know, being able to leverage them at live events, you know, really pays off. You know, and then we look at streaming and traditional viewing, and, you know, those numbers drop back off into what I would call the normal level of about 10.5%. But really what we see is the power that sports fans bring to various charitable efforts. Sports fans are very giving people. And, you know, again, over 10% of sports fans give to some sports-related charities. So just a little bit of information from our annual sports fandom study. We included philanthropy this year, and it's been a really great topic to work with. So, you know, let's get to our interview with Brian Anderson, and stay tuned because this is really going to be worth it. Interestingly enough, I met Brian about 2 weeks ago at the Sports Philanthropy Conference in Chicago. And I was really fascinated by Brian's story, what Brian does, Brian's contribution to the sports industry, and just about everything involved in Brian's life. So, Brian, first of all, welcome to My First Job in Sports.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
We're really excited to have you on board. You know, one of the things we like to start off with is talking a little bit about your background. And rather than me give that background, which, by the way, I do like to do, I would rather have you give your background. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how you got interested in sports. Just, you know what? This is your chance to shine, Brian. So go for it.
So thank you again for having me here, Neil and Dr. G. Of course, my name is Brian Anderson from East Baltimore, Green Mountain 24 specifically. That means a lot to me because I am right around the corner from Cecil Kirk Recreation Center, which is one of the most highly acclaimed AAU programs coming out of Baltimore. So that's how I got my start in sports, just being a native of the community. But just having that grit and that hunger of, what is it to come out of my situation growing up in Baltimore, and basketball just being that lane for me. And it was a great opportunity and a family for me to grow up in, that now just transcends into all the work that I do now, using sports as a medium, not only to inspire kids to, one, take their health seriously, but then also pursue future goals that may be within the athletic realm. And also just more so or less understanding how sports can play such a unique medium in bringing communities together, resolving conflict, even just some of the simple things as education. So overall, sports itself has allowed me to play a vital role within my community, which I'm very thankful for. In my past life, I did play football in college, so that was good for me. But I think that also that actual opportunity to play and coming to an end early, steered me into my second life, which was me studying abroad. So I've been blessed at the age of 29 to be traveled to over 30 countries. So
Wow.
that's actually one of my, touch points. Like my number of countries has to outweigh my age. So overall, just having that exposure to young urban African Americans traveling while I was in college to now expand my thinking about what I can offer to myself and my community. It just kind of just boom. It was like a pretty much like, a brain burst, just showing like how sports travel and this unique understanding of me coming from urban communities where a lot of us don't travel, how that can now bring value into what I do. So in short, that's kind of how I, articulated my vision for what I do right now. And some of the things that I'm currently doing right now, working with, DC Scores, which is a soccer poetry nonprofit here in DC.
Soccer poetry? You got to help me out there a little bit.
Okay, cool. So in simplicity, right? For me personally, every urban kid wanted to be a ball player, and every ball player typically, wants to be an artist in some way, and every artist some way, looked at the ball player. So it's just kind of like this, this known thing in the community where, every ball player want to be an artist, artists want to be ball players. And us at DC Scores, it's kind of like, pretty much puts that on the platform for our kids to now teach them soccer and poetry throughout the season, 2 weeks, 2 days a week. We're doing soccer, 2 days a week doing poetry. In the fall, kids are actually performing poetry and competing at a poetry slam. Our kids are also playing soccer and performing and competing at a high level. So being able to now articulate that in a way where now those thoughts that was in their poems are now being used in service learning projects in the springtime. So that is a full circle, real opportunity for our kids to play in their community, learn, read, articulate their words, and then also now have some actionable things that they can do in their community to create a change.
I love that. And I want to go back a little bit because if we look at your educational background, you didn't necessarily major in sport, tourism, but you're heavily immersed in those industries. So what I really want to know is when did you know, because you say you traveled abroad and things like that, but when did you know you wanted to work in sports? When did you know when you wanted to work in tourism? What we want to know that moment.
Man, to be completely honest with you,
That's what we want.
I didn't even think to live past the age of 18, let alone get to college at age 21.
Really?
To be honest, my first brother was dead at 17. My other brother was dead at 21. I graduated college in May 2018. But my mom passed away in May, in March, and my uncles passed away earlier that year too. So for me to get to where I'm at, I didn't even think about sports as like a career. It was just something I was interested in. And for me, traveling abroad, that was just something that I was exposed to in my early years of college, being introduced to individuals who were from similar circumstances to me. I used to live in Philly. It was this woman who took a liking to me. It was a mentor to me while I was a freshman in college. And She was from North Philly, traveled all over the world. Similar circumstances to me, and would just put me onto a lot of game about how I can change the dynamic of who I am in my own mindset. So through that and understanding the value that I have within my community, playing sports, being one of the ones to make it out of my neighborhood, I knew that with the medium of sports just being the idea that all these kids are, surrounding themselves with, being able to utilize my talents and, understanding of the world to show one, globalization is happening. So these kids need to be well informed about how, the world is changing, and being able to show it through sports and saying like, oh, you're aware of this player is from this country, X, Y, and Z, and just be able to speak on those topics. It just allows it to, intersect. And no, I did not know that this was going to be a organic way of doing things just by, simply me working at a soccer organization. Soccer organically is a globalized sport. So through that, I did not see the connections to this point, getting to this point, but yeah.
And you're listening and watching My First Job in Sports interview with Brian Anderson. Brian is he's Officer of Corporate Partnerships at DC Scores. But I want to go back a little bit. First of all, where did you go to college? I didn't see that anywhere.
Yes, I apologize. So I went to Salisbury University. I finished out my last 3 years, but I started at Albright College. And I think that was my real introduction to intercultural lens of the world.
Reading, PA, as I remember correctly?
Yes, sir. It's a very small school, probably max 1,500 people. But out of that 1,500 people, probably 35 to 40% of them are international students.
Sure.
So it was a very big, eye-opener for me particularly, but it definitely played huge value into my development.
The other thing that struck me, and I don't necessarily want to go dwell on this too much, but it seems like you've grown up with a lot of adversity, and a lot of things that my guesses have shaped the person that you currently are. Can you talk a little bit about you talked a bit about losing your brother, and talked about you're losing your mother at a young age, and you talked about a number of things that a lot of people may or may not be able to overcome in life, but you did. Tell us about it.
Yeah. I think growing up in Baltimore, everybody is kind of looking for their niche, right, and their way of life. And you can decide to flow with the group, or you can decide to choose your own path. And for me, simply those situations in my family, it wasn't necessarily me running away from Baltimore, but it was like, I know it has to be something more out here for me. I know it has to be something more that I can be doing myself. I know that this is not the end all be all of life. So to have these opportunities to travel was simply just not even a fight or flight response, but it was like, I gotta do it. I gotta go. Even when I had got the scholarship to play football at Albright, I even still had my grandma, mailing me letters I know you got a couple of dollars. Can you send me some money? Just in short, literally soon one day after I left to go to college, it's the same day my mom left to go to rehab. So kind of left my grandma at home by herself. So,
Wow.
it was never a situation where it was wow, I am, getting to a point and I'm happy. It was no, how am I getting to a point where I can now sustain myself, but then also put myself in a position to now get back. So that's been always the constant thing for me ever since I left the house at 18 to go to college, is about how am I position myself to get back from a financial standpoint to my family, but then also from a time standpoint to my community. So overall, just having that understanding of people depending on me, it did push me further to, want to excel for myself. But then as that I was excelling for myself, it opened my eyes more to the responsibility I had to my community. Because all the things that I've already mentioned to you already, I'm not supposed to be here. I mean, just in short too, my mom, she had me when she was locked up. So a lot of my siblings, me and two of my siblings, were born kind of somewhat in the system. And thankfully, my aunts and, family members took us in. But throughout that, that just organically ties into who I am as a person, just thinking that I ain't supposed to be here. Even in my free time, I work with kids in foster care. So I work with kids in foster care doing one-on-one, helping them, support them with their personal needs, particularly with kids with neurodiverse issues. So just having that humility and having these roles in life that just kind of continues to slap me in my face to make me feel like, yo, you ain't nobody, you know what I mean? And that's kind of how I humble myself. Just because I traveled, I do these things, I still got to go to the block every day and chill with my youngest on the block that don't have no thought about what tomorrow may look like, but I got to inspire them and make sure that they're good, right or wrong, whatever they're doing.
And I love how you are really centered around making sure that we are kind of beyond the statistics, even in regards to the travel piece, because you clearly believe travel is important, especially for young black kids. And according to the data, I think it was a 2021 study, while 49% of Black Americans had traveled abroad, 75% of white Americans have also traveled abroad. So clearly we're underrepresented in that travel area, and you are very committed to increasing that percentage of people of color, specifically Black people, traveling. And so, because you took not service, but travel trips when you were in college, can you speak to students specifically about why they should take advantage of opportunities like travel abroad? Because, I'm a professor at Temple, and it's very simple and easy for students to travel abroad, but not many of them do it. And we're like, man, you all are missing on this incredible opportunity to travel abroad. And it's literally as easy as ABC. So can you just talk to them, specifically the young Black and brown kids, in regards to why they should take advantage of travel abroad, service immersion trips, any type of trip their school or university is offering?
Anybody who is a little scared of traveling and don't want to do it, you're not alone. But then also, you are built with the skills to take full advantage of whatever opportunities come towards you, particularly us as African Americans growing up in these urban communities. Some of the potential morals and values that I align with the mogul mindset, that's me and this is my logo, but it's about taking those ideas of struggle and kind of flipping it on its head, right? So, for instance, coming from an urban community where we've probably had to make ends meet, using food stamps, using, hustling to kind of get by. Like, that is a staple in Baltimore. Like, that is who we are. We got to do to do that. But also on the back end, for someone who was thinking about coming from American traveling, they're like, bro, I'm scared to adapt. I'm not going to have the money. Who's going to support me? But if you just thought internally about how you make ends meet internally here in your own home, in your own community every day, you could think a little bit outside the box about how when you travel abroad, how these experiences may be of benefit to you. Yes, good or bad, right? Yeah, you might have to travel with, $200, but how are you going to find a way to now bring, the value to the situation that you can, but then also take the most out of the situation? I say that to say, I went on my first study abroad trip with $2,500 and I was gone for 6 months.
Wow.
And I think that $2,000 was gone within the first 2.5 months. And then all the, you planning trips with your friends. Oh, we're going to go here during this time. That money was gone. But it was how am I going to figure this out? Thankfully, I went on a trip with other people who were in the same boat as me, trying to figure it out. We're all in the same game. We're all scared. We're all having our own understandings of life. But being able to connect with people and taking that risk is the biggest thing that you could do, because while I didn't have money, other people stepped up for me and I allowed them to. And then I had to learn how to hustle a little bit more. So the next thing you know, I'm having a little job in Cyprus. What am I doing as this little American kid on a study abroad trip, having a little job, volunteering, helping at this local retail store on that shipment days to get a couple dollars, right? But that now allowed me to ingrain myself in the community, become a part of the community, not just an observer. So identifying with all the things that you may be scared of, and but that might be subtracting from your thoughts of why this may be a good idea, lean into those things and understand how that can now play a deeper value into what you're trying to do at the end of the day. And by me making those very quick decisions to just go and do things, not knowing I had the money, not knowing if I had the resources, just figuring it out on my own, I think that is what allowed me to have the confidence to now step out on faith and have more opportunities. When I had the first trip to Cyprus, I was just advised to go there from one of my friends who went there the previous year. He was like, bro, you from Baltimore, I'm from Philly. Cyprus is at war. I'm like, yeah, they're at war. He's like, bro, you from Baltimore, go. It's nothing you ain't been through. It's nothing that can happen to you. So just that one step in thought, right? It's nothing that I've already been through that can hurt me is the first step. The second step is, okay, cool. How am I about to get the money? I was a freshman. I presented at a conference that we had at Albright. Just so happened, by me being a freshman and presenting at a conference about something in the art space, I got a $7,000 scholarship that went towards that trip. I didn't know that was coming, but I stepped out on faith to do so. Similarly, so last 2 years ago, I was working with the Special Olympics locally here. I knew that my goal was to work on the Special Olympics international team. I was working with the AmeriCorps team here locally, getting paid $500 every 2 weeks. It sucked, but I worked really hard to, push it out. I could network with everybody on the international team via LinkedIn saying, these are the opportunities that I want to take advantage of myself. I want to volunteer here in Germany. After knocking down 10 to 20 doors, one guy, Lou, one of the head guys at Special Olympics, was like, well, actually, we got a room for you. So all I had to do was pay for a flight. He took care of my room. And I didn't know that because I had to step out on faith, But those things that are now saying, like, well, how am I going to figure this out? How am I going to figure this out? Just do it and things will figure itself out. And that same trip, I went to a concert. I met a friend in line. The next 3 years of me traveling overseas to the Special Olympics programming, I didn't even have to ask for anything because they were giving it to me, one. But then also I had a friend that I can go and stay with on that couch every summer. So overall, anybody that's thinking about it, think about what do you have to lose out of this versus, you don't have nothing to lose, everything to gain.
Dr. G, I definitely see Brian coming in and talking to your classes. I have to say, Brian, there's a lot to unpack there, and a lot of the things that you mentioned are things that Dr. G and others, we cover at our Get in the Game conference that we hold in Baltimore, focused on helping students of color get jobs in the sports business. But more than getting a job, I mean, you've really kind of inspired people on not just getting a job, as I said, but really how to survive and how to overcome and how to turn negatives into a positive. And I'm running out of cliches here, but really, it's very commendable. Hey, Brian, let me ask you, what is this Be the Mogul, organization that you created, I guess, and that you administer or run?
Yes. So Be the Mogul really stemmed out of a college program that I was a president of. It was called Men of Distinction. It was particularly geared to men, but I really wanted to open it up and have it more professionally geared towards all, individuals, but on a professional level. So I've been blessed to have a lot of great friends in a lot of great places. So within that, Be the Mogul was a business professional leadership programming that inspired young African Americans on campus to now, take the steps to pretty much getting in the game and with other field they were, potentially in. So one of my friends, Jeremy, right now, who now was a writer on Issa Rae's production camp. She was in that studio. I mean, she was in those sessions. We were talking about how do we write our 30-second elevator pitch, how are we articulating that and how we say it, and then how we now articulating that to a LinkedIn short blurb when we connect to somebody. And then I had a friend, Keyshawn, who was working at LinkedIn at the time, who would call in and give a whole LinkedIn one-on-one session. So just the basics of how that looked in sophomore, freshman mindset going forward about how we're now aligning this LinkedIn, personality, as well as your personal brand, as well as you going out to conferences and how does this look in as far as, a full circle, moment, simple as, your personal morals and values, how you go into an organization and how you show up, understandingly, particularly from the Black community. I'm sorry to say, but there are certain things that we can't do that other people can get away with in, certain spaces. Like even for me, if I'm not being too blunt,
say what you want to
say. I have to be very, very of how I communicate things in person, verbally, via email, how that is communicated, and even about just simply not being the person being called out publicly for any errors. You got to work 10 times hard to make sure that everything is personally on your behalf taken care of, because anything public in terms of how it can be portrayed to the organization, how it could be viewed, you would rather not have those interpretations of you. So how are we now building our personal self to be able to be a person of stature, trust, integrity internally before we come into these places of work where there's a certain standard, and how we can separate the two. Even me as an SGA president and council member at the time at the school, I was helping push bereavement policies, being able to help support with mental health issues in terms of people being late and taking tests that, or issues at home. So that also took on its own,
like a life of its own.
certainly, right, when it came down to mental health and work organization,
Sure.
and how you're going forward. So all these things played a vital role into, the college development of who I was now. And now today, we're using Be the Mogul as inspirational travel sports programming for youth to now inspire kids to, one, travel, but now understand who they are through the lens of sports. All the great American stories, particularly about us as Black people and overcoming and gaining rights, were particularly in sports, breaking the race and color divide, getting in certain athletic achievements, like now, more increase in wages and certain things like that. So understanding our historical African American history through the lens of sports can now allow itself to now be transcended amongst other lenses of education and other sports as well.
What I love about you, Brian, is that you're a both and is what I call them, right? You're not just an entrepreneur, but you also work in the industry. You do both, right? And I have students that have aspirations to be entrepreneurs one day, but they also want to work in the industry. So you are that great individual that's doing that. And so on the DC Score side, you work in partnerships. And so can you talk about your role in partnerships? And I really want you to talk about your role in partnerships because I call it non-traditional in a sense, because all my students want to go and work for the Eagles sponsorships team. They want to work for the Sixers, right? But nobody's really thinking about that youth sports space. And so can you talk about what partnerships look like on that youth sports, youth soccer level?
It's huge. It's huge because kids are the future. If you're watching TikTok right now, it's because the kids were on it 5 years ago. Like, kids are the future, right? So anything that's trending, it got to come from the youth in some way, shape, or form. You think about prom. Prom was directly targeted to the youth, and now they're outselling Gatorade and Powerade. So, yes, like being able to articulate our vision from a partnership side to major corporate partners is extremely important because we're a nonprofit. Our budget is majority corporate funding, which we're very thankful for, certainly with the times that we're in right now. So that certainly makes my job a little bit harder. But also,
mine too.
It is very, 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 I love what I do because I get to talk with all these smart people every day about how they can make a difference in the community with kids, where you think about it like they were kids once, they live in the community once, and they don't even know how they can, they're, not to say they're too far off the ground, but the intentionality behind what they're doing can be very much more targeted and directed. So within my role in partnerships, I understand the needs as the organizations. It could be a government, it can be a nonprofit, it could be major, tech companies, understanding their needs and how they want to support. And then how are we negotiating on behalf of filling those assets that they need while also being able to support our needs internally. One project right now that I'm currently working on is with Clark Construction. Clark Construction, if anybody knows about the construction industry, individuals who work within the space are aging out. So we need more plumbers, we need electricians, we need more handy individuals. From a project management side, a lot of Clark Construction individual workers go to college. So they may not have the hands-on skill sets to actually do the work, but they can manage a project. So now for Clark, they're interested in now building up their workforce development program for youth. Typically, they only work in high schools, but our internal programming serve elementary and middle schools. How do we make that, make that need in between? Well, one, by the time you get into high school, you've already made a decision somewhat of what you probably want to do, right? You may have went to a, English or math generated high school or trade school. So in those, situations, you're making that decision. Attacking the middle school age students at an earlier age by giving them exposure to all the construction projects that's happening here in DC, being able to take a trip to a construction site, having a project manager from Clark Construction come in and to do activities, building Legos and doing other projects, doing basic things like teaching a kid about Tetris. Like, that's one of my favorite games. These kids don't even know about Tetris. Like, what? So having little challenges like that, right? We're really, not to say dumbing it down, but from a Clark perspective, how are they now creating interest in kids to now be in these trades? Well, you have to meet them where they are with this in the schools, which we have control of. All right, cool. By, also assessing the needs of our kids. So talking to the math and science departments and their teachers and seeing how this information is being taught to our kids, right? And then understanding, okay, what is the community side that Clark have? Do they have a curriculum there trying to build in? Is it something that I have to create and now have to sell on behalf to them, right? Cool. Now I have to think about my internal ROI. How much work do I have to do? And how much is this going to be on our other capacity of our staff? So when it comes time to negotiating deals that way and being able to paint the picture out to organization, that is very, very important. But that's the fun part for me of building that partnership and understanding the needs, interests, and values of each partner.
Well, we're listening and watching Brian Anderson, who has an incredibly inspirational story. And I have to admit, a lot of what I'm hearing, some of it is very foreign to me, to be very honest, because, I grew up in a different environment. But the one thing that I think is common and probably common between me and Dr. G and you is that, we all had mentors. We all had people who kind of guided us and provided us with, whether it was advice, whether it was just, somebody to listen to us. Brian, did you have somebody, back in the early days of your career that you relied on as your mentor?
Yeah, so my whole Cecil Kirk family, they were my mentors and supporters even up to this day. But they helped me get through a lot of what I was going through on a personal level, but then also helping me shape what I wanted to do in the future. I would say that since I've been in college, I've been blessed with a lot of great mentors. Of course, joining my fraternity, Kappa Alpha Psi, that has created numerous opportunities for me. And throughout that, I would say right now, Lawrence Ham, he pretty much runs all of the events in DC from a sports side of things. He's a big top exec here. When I met him, this is probably 2017. I blew up his phone for about 6 months before he even replied to me. But ever since then, it has been nothing but love between me and him. And I appreciate him dearly. My uncle used to always tell me, find somebody who's doing the job that you want to do and just stay under him. And that has been one of the most, gracious relationships I've had by far in my entire life. And someone that I continue to look up to and that is always willing to give back to me in any way, shape, or form. But one thing that I think also we want to give a shout out to the kids who are looking for mentorship. The biggest thing for your mentors is understanding that they're human, they got lives, they have a gazillion other things that they could be doing. How can they help you? And how can you make their job easier to help you? And that was one thing I had to realize is that I'm not calling somebody just, hey, how you doing? I'm coming with an intent, a purpose. And not to say that I just want something all the time either, because that is the relation, that is the relationship we have, mentor-mentee relationship. So we call it, it's not, always a need, but we know that this is, relevant. But any call that I make, I've already did the groundwork. I've already put myself in position to do so. I've already shown great integrity, great respect, did introduction. So when he just welcomes me into the room, it's, I know, right, such and such. Oh, I remember you hit me up such and such. Or, I understand, where you're coming from, and the work that you do. So this could be a way that you could support me. So whatever you're asking for, you got to do the heavy lifting, because it could be something as simple as your mentor making a call. But if you aren't prepared, you haven't done the research, you aren't, in the mindset to take advantage of the opportunity, then it's just a waste,
Brian, it's very clear that in your mentorship journey and even with your travel abroad journey, you have been very bold. You have been incredibly bold in your approach.
He put himself out there.
You put yourself out there. Okay. And that takes a lot of boldness. However, there are a lot of people and a lot of students that are out there that are very shy. They're very shy. They're not necessarily bold in going to get what they want. And so what would you tell the students that are shy and they're having a struggle really getting outside of their comfort zone to go get it like you did?
Closed mouths don't get fed. Simple as that.
That was so Baltimore. That was so Baltimore.
Eating is an incredible motivation.
But so that's a very big thing for me coming from Baltimore. It's everybody always look at us as we're aggressive, or, and they kind of take our motivation, our energy out of context. No, we literally legit, we're hungry. We want more for ourselves. And if that's all you need is to say that, I'm shy. Well, I'm sorry. It
You
is
can
what it
curse.
is.
It's
Like,
okay if you want to.
like, you guys shit don't get off the toilet. Like, it is what it is.
Right.
Because there's
You
other
don't want it
people out here
bad
that
enough.
want it. And in sports, right? This is sports. This is a competitive. Well, sports is organically competitive, let alone layering in the fact that you have all these people that who want to be in the sports world because they think it's a glitz and glamorous world. It's not that. You're working tireless, endless hours, little to no, celebratory, experience, and then you're right back to it again. So it's like, but everybody wants to be in this space. So it's really hard to separate yourself outside of working hard. And if you're not going to work hard, somebody else will. There's somebody right now working for a AA, AAA minor league team in Alabama right now, working 2 to 3 jobs for the Trash Pandas or something. And now they're working, like they're getting that experience, they're getting those opportunities. Like, what are you willing to sacrifice to get to what you want to do? I've had to do it all. You know what I mean? Like you said, living off of nothing, working 2 or 3 jobs just to get to this point where I'm still not where I want to be, but just being in this space is so much more rewarding for me that I couldn't even want more else, So yeah.
Hey, Brian, I see here on your bio, you call yourself a sports photographer, and you've mentioned a couple of other kind of more, artistic efforts. Where can we see these things? This is the self-promotion plug part where you can kind of plug your work and all that. So tell us about where we can see your work and a little bit about that work.
Yeah. So actually my first actual job and my first career was photography. I've been shooting since I was been 10 years old. My first job was working at a production studio where I would literally make beats, rap over the beats, produce the videos and film the videos for about 3 years. So I have a love and deep affinity for photography and videography. And right now in my life, as you had mentioned before, Dr. G, is that I am corporate and I do have a lot of artistic skills. I've utilized these corporate opportunities to now enhance the opportunities from my friends who are now in this art space. And I still do that as well, just off of who can resist, right? If it's someone right here who, needs some, well, one, everybody wants their photo taken, sadly enough. So, it's endless work to be done. But then also realizing that I can get into certain rooms with certain people, that just allowed me to do more with my camera and myself. So I'm not going to turn down opportunities to be in the spaces where, I have, the Mystics playing and Della Dawn is there and they need a volunteer videographer or photographer. So I've just lent myself to a lot of different spaces, and that allowed me to gain more and more access to people, and me understanding that me just having a camera and being in a space and networking through that and me just bringing value in those meaningful ways also gives me value within my corporate life as far as these partnerships and understanding of how the world works, just being a fly on the wall, understanding how all the pieces are moving within the room. So just leveraging these opportunities of the skills that I have just to put myself in certain situations, that's the biggest thing. It didn't even have to be a financial payout. Mr. Smiley at the conference, I met him at another event that was just, brought to me by someone who needed a photographer, but we were learning about the economic state of the world with, Africa and a lot of other, countries coming here to speak to Biden at the time. So just by that alone,
Sure.
It gave me so much of a different understanding of who I am and what I do. So, yeah.
You're pursuing your doctoral degree. What are you getting it in? And what's your rationale behind pursuing it? I'm always interested as to why people go through this awful process.
So my rationale, I guess I would have to start with that. So I told you networking, right? My mom passed in March. I graduated in May. I had 2 offers to get my grad degree, which was in at University of Baltimore and Salisbury University. So my grad degree, my program director there and one of my favorite teachers, they had started, conflict analysis and dispute resolution is pretty still new field. So they helped start the doctorate program at Kennesaw State.
Sure.
So once I finished my master's program at Salisbury University, I finished a year early. And then that's how I started my career at the United Nations, UNESCO in Paris. So I got there in January 2020. COVID happened in March of 2020. I came back because they were like, you want to stay here or go home? I said, I'll stay here. So I came back in September of 2020. And through that, in that moment, I knew I wasn't coming home to work. So I talked to my professors and they were like, apply to get your doctorate at Kennesaw. And it was for international conflict international conflict development, with more of a focus in major sporting events and conflicts within that. So I'll be studying the World Cup, the Olympics, and all of those issues that surround from a social impact versus, just the financial, gains. So that's what I was studying. But I did that for a year at Kennesaw State, started online in January 2021, and I stopped that fall 2021 because they were requiring us to now be in person. So I couldn't afford to leave my grandma because I'm still taking care of her back home in Baltimore. So I couldn't afford to be there. So, yeah.
I was so glad I had a chance to really sit down and talk with you at the Sports Philanthropy Conference. And also, frankly, really glad that I had a chance to sit down and talk with you today because, your situation, frankly, is so much bigger. Life is so much bigger than, I don't know, than things and everything, I guess. And, and being able to use sports and channel sports to help you, achieve what you want in life, it to me, is just an incredibly inspirational story and an incredibly useful story to a lot of the students and people that, I know Dr. G speaks to. She's right now on summer break, but I know she's getting ready for the fall term and, getting ready for her classes. And Brian, it was a wonderful story. Dr. G and I want to thank you for coming on My First Job in Sports. I'm hoping very much to see you at Get in the Game November 7th through 9th. You've got an incredible story that I think the students and the attendees and really everyone at the event needs to hear. You should be proud of yourself. I'm proud of you. And it's been a great story. So I want to thank you for coming on My First Job in Sports, Brian.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you, Dr. G and Mr. Neal.
Thank you for tuning in to My First Job in Sports. This show has been produced by Brad Mabey. Back episodes can be found at sportsmarketanalytics.com, on the SBRnet YouTube channel, or all major podcast platforms. If you like the show, give us a great review. Also, you can follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, or X.